Hey, deserving listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments from my videos from last 2 weeks. Let's get to it. This is an email from patron Kira from Canada. She says, I have been watching your TV reaction videos for a couple of years now, nearly every day that you post. I have probably consumed your videos more than any other piece of media since COVID. Well, just chiming in here, patron Kira, that is awesome. I mean, also terrifying to think that you would watch me all the time, because that feels like you would get bored over time, and I feel pressure that I have to be not boring every time. But much appreciated. I mean, I have my YouTube channels that I watch every day as well, so I get that. You go on here. In your recent video, you said that prior to COVID, you didn't watch reality TV and had preconceived notions about reality TV, that it was trashy, mindless, etc. But now you say there are lots of interesting things about reality TV. What specifically is interesting about it exactly? I believe these shows hold both the drama of relationships and the fantasy of true fairy tale love. But I get the feeling I am subconsciously processing something while watching the show, maybe some kind of catharsis. Maybe we project our own frustrations onto them. For example, I can yell at Ed for being a narcissist, but maybe I'm also processing my own narcissistic traits. Why is it so easy to watch these shows mindlessly? Why do you think people are consumed by reality TV? Why are so many of us fascinated by your reactions? I am currently completing a media and communications degree and really want to write a paper on this. Any of your thoughts would be appreciated. Yeah, great questions. Hard to know. We really don't know why any of us do anything, so it's a lot of speculation. But I think there are some solid speculations that we might be able to make. And yeah, basically all the above that you were talking about. I would also add Schadenfreude, the idea that, and the well understood phenomenon among humans, that when other people are suffering or bad things are happening to them, or they're getting their just desserts, we feel satisfied because it's them and not us. I think also another aspect of this is learning. We are social creatures, and we are obsessed with acceptance and validation from the people around us. We evolved to be this way, clearly. Other social animals are this way as well, particularly our cousins, other primates. We depended on acceptance and upon the resources sharing that other people in our tribe provided. And for those humans, early primates, who weren't born with an innate drive to gain acceptance and to have harmony with the people around you, the people who didn't evolve that mechanism in all likelihood got weeded out of the gene pool, because they would wander away from the tribe, or they would get rejected by the tribe and die very soon because of predators. And it's a bit of a misnomer that we're top of the food chain. We are now with technology, and have been for centuries, but back in the day, we were food for big cats, hyenas. I don't know about hyenas, but other big cats. And so that was something that was of a concern. And so one of the ways that we protected ourselves is by herding and by keeping alert for each other. Like, oh, here comes someone, let's, blah, blah, blah. Or let's fight back the cat together, a tiger, a lion, this kind of thing. Jaguar, leopard. Anyway, so we evolved to do that, and we have that drive still. We wake up in the morning, and a part of our motivation, a part of our natural motivation, is still along those lines. And since a lot of us are isolated and don't really have a tribe that we interact with on a hour-by-hour basis, because, you think back in the day, we were in a constant connection and constant interaction with our tribe, with our 50 to 100 people. We could see them. We woke up next to them. We fell asleep next to them. We ate next to them. We worked next to them. We fought next to them. We saw them giving birth. We saw them maybe even having sex sometimes. That's another anyway, point is that we have that drive. And so when we are isolated, or we might be around a lot of people, but we don't really know them, I think that's another reason why we have a lot of anxiety and depression, is because we come into contact with a lot of human beings and we're very concerned with their acceptance of us, but we have almost no way of knowing if they actually accept us. Even if they tell us that they accept us, we don't really know, right? We evolved in the Pleistocene on the African savanna, really knowing when people accepted us because we saw them, 365 days a year, 24/7, and you would know if someone didn't accept you over time. And there would be these trials where your kin, your tribe, their loyalty to you would be put to the test. A tiger is coming to kill you, and they help you out. That's a pretty big indication that someone actually likes you, that kind of thing. So we're in constant contact with other humans, but we have no ability to know if they actually like us, accept us, would be there for us. So we might be around a lot of people, but we don't really feel safe. And so we have this innate anxiety that's constant, and we suffer greatly from that. While I'm on this topic, the obvious solution is to have people around you that you're around frequently. During the pandemic, especially people who lived on their own, were isolated from other humans, and this took a toll. We're just beginning to research the effects that had on people. But anyway, so even before the pandemic, I think we were on average isolated, more so than I think is natural. And so to watch reality TV, it gives us this ability to see, so if we apply that behavior to when we were on the African savanna 200,000 years ago, we would be with our tribe of 50 people. We would see someone else making a mistake or doing something that's a little out of the ordinary. Maybe there's a verbal fight or something. And we're very motivated innately to pay attention to that because we want to learn from it. We want to see, what does the crowd do? And say two people are fighting, and part of our attention to that is okay, who's going to win? What do I need to learn from this? And so you see two people fight, and one person wins and gets the support of the crowd, then that's very important to you. We evolved to pay attention to that. It's the same way that we pay attention to predators, or when we're walking up to the edge of a cliff and we have that feeling. It's because we evolved to have those feelings. We might not have evolved the feeling of the cliff, but we evolved the fear response. Anyway, point is that when we watch the reality TV, that's another possible speculated reason as to why we're paying attention, because we're trying to learn from it. We're trying to be okay, how am I supposed to behave? What does the crowd say? Because that's a big part of these reality TV shows, is paying attention not only to the TV show, but also the crowd. Maybe it's someone you're sitting next to, on the couch with, but there's a lot of online activity in addition, right? So that's another reason that you could speculate. Another, as you say, is true love, fairy tale. There's a reason why rom-coms are popular. There's a reason why even in movies and TV shows that aren't necessarily oriented toward love stories, they will insert a love story. We love a good love story, and we might have evolved to be that way. It's hard to know. It could be a cultural thing, but mainstream culture, we tend to really have a lot of enjoyment when we see people that we identify with having a lot of success in a lot of areas, including in love. Also, it's mindless, I think. When I think about all the different TV shows that I watch, with all the different TV shows available out there, my favorite shows are pretty mentally taxing, House of the Dragon, these kinds of things, or I have to really pay attention. And I often will have to watch the episode twice and then maybe watch a few online videos analyzing before I really understand the whole thing, right? Whereas with reality TV, you can fall asleep halfway through the episode and wake up later and pretty much get the gist of everything that happened, particularly the way they recap everything. So it's very easy to watch, right? You just sort of kickback. And I feel like in today's media landscape, there isn't a lot of that. I feel like there was a lot more of that in the past. You know, you think of the sitcoms of the past in the 80s and 90s, a lot of it was fairly mindless. Today, there's so much intense things that are in the media that sometimes I think you just want to sit back and chill. You also mentioned projection in a very smart, intelligent way, that we might have narcissistic traits that we don't like about ourselves, and thus when someone presents a convenient canvas upon which we can project, we can yell at them when really we're yelling at the self. And that is absolutely, I think, a part of why people watch this show. We all have aspects of ourselves that we are insecure about, that we hate ourselves about, and watching these shows provides the perfect canvas because there's someone on this show that represents aspects of ourselves, you know, the wide variety of the characters. Also, we are able to transfer onto these people through transference, displacement, our past relationships onto these individuals. And some of you know this quite explicitly. Some people aren't necessarily aware of it. Something might actually be pre-awareness for you. One thing to think about, actually, while we're on this topic is maybe, if you want to, make a list of the top 5 90 Day Fiancé, or really reality TV show characters that pissed you off the most, got you the most angry, got you the most upset. And I do this actually with my students, not with reality TV, but other kinds of things. And then under each of those individuals' names, write out why you hate them, or just general qualities that they exhibit. Descriptors, you know, narcissistic, stuck up, angry, abusive. Maybe be a little bit more elaborate. What kind of abuse? What sort of narcissistic are you talking about? What, you know, are they self-centered? Do they harm others? Do they not seem to care about other people's feelings? You know, write out what you observe. And then the exercise is to think about who in your past is like one or more of those characters, given the different qualities of those individuals. And then further down the road of analysis, you can think of, okay, have I ever been accused of any of these qualities in my past or present or something? So in the first instance, we are, you know, having relational traumas that we've internalized. We're having difficulty with it, which is natural. And to watch the show is a way to externalize that relationship. And when we're yelling at Ed, we're really yelling at a past boyfriend or our father or something like that. Or we internalized aspects of our parents that are unfortunate, and we exhibit those, but it's out of our awareness because the ego can't handle the acknowledgement that we are like our parents or that we have negative qualities. It's hard for us to acknowledge that universally. And then we will project those aspects onto other people because we don't like it about the self, and we deny it about the self. We project it, and then when we see it in someone else, we attack it. It feels more satisfying. I'm not narcissistic. They're narcissistic, and look at them. Well, we can all agree that they're narcissistic. And da-da-da. When in reality, we hate ourselves for being narcissistic. Now, are we really narcissistic? Is it where we just hold that? You know, it's complicated, obviously, but you know, that's another, I think, potent reason as to why people watch reality TV. You mentioned catharsis. That's a very complicated Freudian topic that I won't go into right now. But the way we generally use it in contemporary culture is that it provides us a place to have emotions that are stuck inside of us. And that is one aspect, one subcategory of the general notion of catharsis. And there's all sorts of different aspects of the overall topic of catharsis and drives. And anyway, point is that, yeah, I think that we are looking for, I don't know, energy. Why do we watch horror movie shows? Why do we watch horror movies? Why do people click on things on Twitter that make them upset? We really respond to emotional reactivity. We don't like things that are not emotionally reactive. It's counterintuitive. You would think that, the way people talk, that if something made you angry, you wouldn't watch it, right? But I'm pretty sure that these TV shows know that their viewership goes up when someone on the show is very anger inducing in the individuals. Think of Angela, Ed, these kinds of people. There are petitions afoot to get rid of these people because people are so angry at the individual and at the show. And you would think that if that anger was causing viewership to go down and thus profits, since we live in a capitalistic society, then they would get rid of Angela and Ed, but they keep casting them repeatedly, right? So when we feel anger, we pay attention. And so I think that we have a need to have that catharsis, as we're putting it right now. I think another aspect is cultural participation in our ever fragmented world. I grew up in a time when there were 3 major TV channels and really only 1 or 2 TV shows a night that were any good. There was the Happy Days, the Laverne and Shirley, MASH, this kind of stuff. And everyone watched it, or at least everyone watched it some of the time. And so the next day at work or at school or on the playground, you could have conversations about these things, and everyone did it together. Everyone understood it. Everyone knew what was happening. There was Top 40 radio. Everyone listened to that. There were certain TV shows. There were certain sports teams. There were certain things in the news, and everyone knew everything because there was a very narrow band of information coming at us back then. So now, obviously, that's very different, and we gain variety and more niche kinds of shows that we want to watch, which is good on one level, but we lose connection with other people. It's really interesting. You'll meet people who, for example, for y'all who watch my channel, the fact that you're watching this right now means you probably watch a lot of my stuff, because why would you watch me yammering into the microphone about comments? So you probably watch a lot of my stuff, and if you met someone else that also watched my channel, you would be able to talk about a lot of things instantly, right? They're not only me, but also the reality TV shows that I watch, and you'd have a lot in common. You have a lot of things to talk about, particularly if you were interacting with them every day. It'd be like, oh, did you watch his video the other day, or did you watch 90 Day Fiancé? You would have instantly something to talk about, get up in arms about, share opinions about, validate each other about, bounce each other. It's just a lot of activity, right? But you meet someone that is in a different cultural pocket, of which there are now millions, even in your own language, right? It's impossible to have a conversation with them, right? Or it's harder, I will say. You meet someone that is in some micro pocket on the internet, of which there are many, and you're just like, you don't even understand what their pocket is about. You don't even get what that's based on. You're like, so what do you talk about on that forum? Anyway, so with these shows, 90 Day Fiancé in particular, there's a lot of popularity around it, right? And thus brings us together, I think. And I think that's a big motivation. You'll hear other people talk about it. I wonder if there was no chatter on the internet and no videos on YouTube or anything about 90 Day Fiancé, I wonder if the viewership would plummet because people just would naturally drift away to something else. But I imagine for a lot of people, they get into these communities and maybe there's a season that doesn't really resonate with them, and they might pull away a little bit from the show and maybe a little bit away from the micro community. And then they don't have anyone to talk to about anything. And so you're just like, well, I guess I'll start watching. It might be unconscious, it might not be. Anyway, and I think that's a good thing. Another reason why I think people watch these shows and particularly participate, but maybe even not if participating online, is specifically bullying. I've talked about this a little bit already, but I think specifically, we all understand that on the playground in the 5th grade that there are bullies and there are people who, for some reason, are identified by the bullies as easy victims. You might have been one of the bullies. You might have been one of the easy victims. You might have been one of the bystanders. But we all understand that, right? There's those kids who, for whatever, there's something about their vibe or their identity that just is a lightning rod for bullies, and they will attract several bullies, right? If you've ever been bullied, you notice that, right? You'd have friends that were never targeted, and you were, for whatever reason, they just came after you all the time, and you had a hard time kind of reacting to it, right? And that doesn't, you're not to blame for being bullied, but there are factors that maybe you gave off that made bullies feel like you'd be an easy victim. Could have been your identity. You could have been the one brown kid in an all-white school or whatever. You know, there's obviously none of these things are your fault. Anyway, so when we look at that phenomenon, we can see it for what it is, which is you have bullies who are hurt and are struggling, and one of the ways they cope with it is to hurt other people, right? It's obvious. Also, there's a lot of insecurity among people, maybe particularly younger people, and they will look for ways to make them feel more secure. And one of the ways that we all do this is through Schadenfreude and by putting other people down, talking shit about others, or bullying others, or talking, or actually, harming them in minor to major ways. And so the bully will do that, but also the bystanders. And there's a reason why victims continually get victimized, is because the bystanders don't necessarily take action to help. And if you're ever in a situation, one of the best things you can teach your kids is to do something, even if it doesn't involve you. What do you do? You want to be careful, obviously. But point is that it's a well-known human phenomenon. It probably goes back to the Pleistocene, 200,000 years ago, that when we feel insecure, we have a number of different defenses to stave off that insecurity, and that sense of feeling alienated from your tribe. And maybe in the past we didn't have to bully as much because we felt closer and more secure in our tribe. But anyway, so we see that. Well, it's not like once we become 18 years old and we're officially legally an adult, we somehow become another species of animal. We're the same animal with the same tendencies, the same behavior, the same psychologies. It just manifests in a different venue. And bullying is also something that we do as adults. It just looks differently. Sometimes it can be way more intense and more harmful, depending. But with these shows, I think for some people, it provides that outlet that hurt people. And of those who are maybe prone to a little bit of bullying, or at least maybe they're the person behind the bully that is not, explicitly involved in the bullying, but they're supportive of it, or they think like, yeah, get that kid or whatever. And so when we watch these shows, my hypothesis, because one of the things that I'm doing when I'm watching the show is I'm not only watching the show, but I'm also watching the crowd, the online commentary, including myself, but because I'm doing that, but other people with me that are watching the show and having reactions. And one of the phenomena that I have noticed is that people will, there will be a new show with new characters, new cast members, and it's always like with Love Is Blind season 3 that I was halfway keeping an eye on, okay, who's going to be the bullied target? Who's the victim? And when I watch the show, I'm watching the show but I'm also watching the crowd and wondering, like, early who will emerge. Because, the interesting thing about Love Is Blind is they released these, like, 3-episode chunks, right? So often in the beginning, people will present in a certain way that will look very differently later on. And in the beginning, it was clearly Cole, right? That seemed like the person you would attack, right? I don't know if there was really anyone else that seemed to emerge, or I guess Raven. So I think Raven and Andrew, but Andrew was so brief. I think Raven and Cole were both the individuals in those, and maybe a little bit Bartice, but I think, anyway. So when I watch the crowd, particularly with Cole, there was, and the way it was edited, and he gave off a lot of reasons, and he was at the reunion mortified about his behavior, which I don't think I've posted that reaction video yet. But anyway, interesting reunion. I mean, fascinating reunion. There were some letdowns, obviously, in terms of lack of coverage regarding Matt, but yeah, I can't wait for you to watch those reaction videos to the reunion. I mean, I think I had like several episodes, maybe 8 episodes that I made just from the reunion alone, and half of them were about Cole and Zay. Fascinating stuff. Just really great. Great, is that the best word for it? Fascinating, interesting. Stuff I can get my hands onto. Anyway, so when Cole emerged, as will happen on all these shows when there are new people, you will see the crowd will just focus on that one person or two people, but it's mainly Cole. And, you could argue he deserved it, but it is an interesting social phenomenon that someone will emerge and then a lot of talk about that individual. Now, you could argue that a lot of people are displacing or a lot of people are projecting, and so it's having that effect on people and they're looking for validation, which I think is a part of it, which is fine. But I also think it's a way to gain superiority. That's why people bully. They bully because they feel low, but if they bring someone lower, they feel superior temporarily. And I think you can tell in the tone of the commentator, the person typing or talking. I can usually get a sense of that. I think there are times when, say of the people that were reacting against Cole in the beginning, because I was reacting against Cole in the beginning, and hopefully I'm not being a bully, but the tone and the word choice and the energy behind it, I think there's a way of maybe projecting, maybe displacing, maybe just reacting, right? Because there's just normal human reactions. Sometimes a cigar is a cigar. I think there's a certain tone to that. And then there's the tone, I think, of the bullying. And sometimes it's really overt. If you ever look at comments around the internet, I think some of the delineation is really obvious. You'll really hear this language being used against individuals that will seem really harsh, And I think bullying is a part of it. I hate to be a bummer. And then, Patron Kiera, you also ask, why are so many of us fascinated by your reactions, by my videos? And I think that it's interesting. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question. I don't think I've ever really even thought about it, which you think I would. But it's also an interesting idea to begin with, that so many of you would be fascinated with my reactions, just the way you phrased it. I don't think I'd ever thought of it in that tone before. And so if we go off that, which I don't even know is true, if people are quote unquote fascinated or they're just passively watching. I mean, some people literally watch my videos so they can fall asleep because they like my voice. So I don't know. But I think that there are a number of reasons why people might like my commentary particularly, or at least these are things that I've heard and sort of cobbled together over time. I think kind of fundamentally, we sometimes just want to see if our reaction is normal. I'm like that. I will have a big time reaction and we'll ask y'all, see, like, am I weird right now? I'm guessing I'm weird right now. Or are you seeing what I'm seeing? Because sometimes it's really just hard to know. Humans are weird, and perception is weird, and we all filter everything through our bias and experience, and we can never know, like, am I alone here? Because sometimes I am. Sometimes my reactions, I'm very much alone. And then I'm wondering, well, now being alone doesn't mean you're not valid. It just means you're just not very common. It could mean you're not valid, but it could also mean that you're just different or something. And so another thing I'll do is I'll talk to my wife. If something was particularly, egregious or reactive for me, I would go to her. I'd be like, and often she'll have a different take, and it'll be interesting. So at the very least, it's interesting to go like, oh, okay, I could see that. And I'm like that. When I watch shows, I will, like I was saying earlier, I watch House of the Dragon episodes, and then I go online and I'm like, what do people think of this episode? I'll go to my friends, Umberto and them, and I'll just be like, oh my God, did you like the show? And so we're social creatures, and we want to know what other people are thinking. Also, I think people watch my videos because at least I've been told, that they learn something that's useful to their lives about relationships and attachment and emotions and happiness and well-being and mental health and all that stuff. Development, parenting, all that stuff. Which, I'll tell you, I mean, the stuff that I talk about, I think about in my personal life constantly. I'm constantly thinking about everything that I talk about. I find all of the things that I talk about things that are interesting to me. So these aren't just things that are academic, professional topics for me. These are things that are fascinating to me and useful. So useful. Another reason I think people watch is because I'm consistent. And this is something that I think at some point was purposeful about. That early in my career as a podcaster, 14 plus years ago, I would have time because, for the first 7 years, year after year, I was losing money and time by doing this podcast. I was spending more money on it, not much, but more money, and the time involved. I was very busy. I mean, there was a good chunk of time while I was podcasting where I was a full-time professor, which involves obviously a lot of teaching, but a lot of university administration. I was program director, which if you have any idea about university work, being program director is a lot of work and a huge headache. That's why I eventually promoted someone under me to be my boss, so I didn't have to do it anymore because it was so much work for so little pay. Anyway, so I was that. At the same time, I had a pretty robust private practice. For a good chunk of time, I was a more than full-time graduate student, getting my second master's and my doctorate. And during your degree, I was at another internship. You're also doing research. That's sort of extra time on top of everything. Obviously, you're writing and reading and stuff. I was in a band. Which we would gig like every week-ish or so. I had a pretty big social life. I had family. I had chores. That's a lot of stuff, and yet I was also doing the podcast. Now, the podcast wasn't very good back then because I didn't have a lot of time to prep, but I was still doing it. So there was a lot of motivation to stop it because there was no reason that I was doing it. People would say, "Why are you doing this podcast? Does it make you any money?" I'd be like, "No, I'm actually losing money." They'd be like, "Well, why are you doing it?" Like, what's the difference? Like, why would anyone make a podcast? Because back then, monetization of podcasts or even YouTube channels was rare. It was hard. It became more. It became easier as through the late teens. But anyway, so early on, because of the podcasts that I listened to back then, there were different types of podcasts, but the podcasts I really loved, the ones that I felt in my soul and really looked forward to listening, were the consistent ones. There might have been a better podcast out there, but if it was sporadic in its postings, it didn't have the same feel to me. And I would get kind of disappointed sometimes when, if any of you are familiar with Dan Carlin's podcast, Hardcore History, that's how he does it. And I think for a lot of good reasons, but he'll go months without posting, and then he'll post this epic 5-chapter, 20-hour series on Roman history or something. Anyway, and I love that. That's one of my favorite podcasts, but I'm not really into it in my soul because I don't know, it's not consistent. And I learned that as fragmented people in our society that are fragmented off and disconnected from everything, we want consistency. We want something that we can depend on. And maybe we have a lot of those things, but we want additional. And I think our content providers are a part of that. So early on, I said, once I commit to a schedule, I'm going to commit to it, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to post, and I'm not going to not do it. In the beginning, it was just one episode a week, but there was a lot of motivation to be like, well, don't post this week. And I think for a while I went every 2 weeks. But again, once I committed to that, then I said I was going to do that and did it. And so I post 2 videos on average, a day, sometimes more than that, right? And so with the stuff that I consume right now on YouTube and podcasts, like my favorite podcast is this local podcast of these 2 guys that I kind of know called Too Beautiful to Live. It's TBTL, Luke and Andrew. And I've been listening to that podcast for 12 years. pretty much on a daily basis. And they release Monday through Friday. And I listen. It's one of the first things I listen to. I don't really learn much from. There's just two guys kind of talking. They're funny, but they're not constantly funny, and it's just comforting to have a consistency. So I think that's another reason why people consume my stuff is the consistency, the feeling of like, there's a reason why Mr. Rogers was on every day at a certain time. There's a reason why my wife, for example, at night, our cable is affixed to a certain channel. I think it's Nickelodeon, and at night they're always playing Friends, just wall to wall Friends, the TV show. And my wife, when she's winding down at night, will just default to that channel because it's always on that channel. We don't really, anytime we move away from that channel, we're watching Netflix or some other streaming service, usually. Anyway, so she'll just watch Friends. Sometimes, but sometimes I'll even say to her, you can watch this on one of our streaming services and there are no commercials, but that requires some kind of clicking. I think she's really just wanting to veg with something that she's familiar with, and that TV show Friends. You can, and sometimes I'll just sit down and watch with her. I'll come in halfway through an episode and not know any of the story, background, and it's just comforting. There's just something comforting about those six people. You know them. It just feels like you're grounded. You're not flailing into the unknown. So I think that's another. I also think that my vibe is, for whatever reason, for some people, I resonate with people, which I enjoy. This isn't something I don't like. I welcome this. That I don't know, a brother or a friend or a father or something, a therapist, a teacher, some kind of role that people will feel that I am in their life, which I welcome. People call it a parasocial relationship. We can call it that. It's fine. But I have my relationships with people that don't know me as well, my parasocial relationships. And it's, we need that, right? We want that in our life. When I was a kid, Mr. Rogers was like an uncle to me. And the people on Sesame Street were like my aunts and uncles or people in my neighborhood. It just felt, you want that feeling of, I don't know, what do I want to say? Of connection is one, family, affinity, familiarity, I think is important. And the way that I make content, I think that it has that possibility. So, because I'm not just talking in a dry way. I can't help but to be me. I can't help but to be. And I wasn't always this way. 14 years ago when I started the podcast, I was really trying to be more professional and more buttoned up and less me. And over time, I just became more and more me. So I think that when people are themselves, you get, if you like them or if you don't hate them, there's a natural tendency for us to bond on some level. Anyway, I think another aspect as to why people watch my channel is, and I didn't realize this when I first started watching, but a lot of people were saying this, is that I provide hope for humanity, or for some people, and compassion for others, and compassion for the self. A lot of people, you'll watch the show and you'll be angry at someone, and then you suddenly realize, oh, I think I'm like that person. I'm like Ed, or I'm like Angela, or I'm like so-and-so that everyone hates. And everyone hates that person. Should I hate myself? I kind of hate myself. And then I talk in a very different way, and you can have an opportunity to look at yourself, or even just some other aspect that's not related to the characters, and say like, maybe I can like myself. Maybe I can have compassion for myself as well, for my partner, for my past partners, for my parents. I don't necessarily have to contact them, because you can have compassion for someone without being in contact with them if they're harmful to you. But at the very least, it just provides apparently a rare perspective online, which I didn't know. Because in my world, compassion and self-compassion and conceptualizing people the way that I do, it's the norm. I'm not weird in my circle. I'm the norm. And so when I went online and people were like, "Oh my God, like you're so wholesome, you're so different, you have so much compassion," and I was like, "Are you sure that I'm that strange? Because I don't feel like I'm that strange." And then I started to become aware of other commentators and the general way people talk about these people on these shows, and I realized, yeah, I'm not only rare, but I'm really weird. The way that people talk about these people. Now, I will say that I do see some people providing commentary like myself for sure, but it's rare. And so I think that also appeals to people that people have told me, which I enjoy, because compassion for others and self-compassion is a passion of mine. All right, well, that's got to be the longest response I had to someone. Let's get to another email here. Anonymous deserving listener, she says, while watching the show of Love is Blind, I recognized the pain and empathized with Matt immediately. I've been in a similar situation with my husband, who was like Matt at the beginning of our relationship. In my case, I did almost exactly what you said in your video, and I spoke up and clearly communicated the ridiculousness of his claim and validated his feelings. Right, so just jumping in here, I was saying that with Colleen, it's possible that, so what Matt was doing was not good, as I was commenting on. He was becoming aggressive and overpowering. You might even say abusive. And Colleen had every right to be upset and to be afraid of that and to be pulling away and to reject that. But I was saying that if, the first thing, if I were to work with them, would be to work on Matt and say, you got to communicate differently, pal. Like, that's not going to work here. That's not okay. You can state your feelings, but you got to tone it down. And if we couldn't do that, then the next step would be for Colleen, or if we did do that, and sometimes Matt would have trouble with that, we would also work with Colleen on stepping up to the plate and being more forward and being more differentiated. Best case scenario, Colleen would be able to say, this isn't about me. He's being aggressive with me, and that's not great. I don't feel great about that, but he's not really a threat. He's not going to hit me. Hopefully, Matt hasn't ever hit her. We don't know. God. But if that's not happening, then it's like, well, he's not going to hit me, and he's scary, but I'm not really in danger, and this is not easy to do. But at the very least, you say to yourself, he's having a reaction that is independent of my behavior. This is him. He doesn't know it's him. How can I help him with that? One way I can help him with that is to lean in and say, hey, husband of mine or fiance of mine, I'm not your ex-wife. I'm not cheating on you. I know it feels like that, but I feel like you're displacing onto me right now. And that's okay. It's normal. But know that I'm here. Don't confuse me for your ex-wife. You can trust me. It's more leaning in. It's hard to do that, but that's kind of what I was saying, and that's what anonymous deserving listener is saying. She's saying, in my case, I did almost exactly what you said in your video. I spoke up and clearly communicated the ridiculousness of his claim and validated his feelings. I reminded him I was not his ex and reassured him of my feelings for him. I gave him reassurance that he would not go through that pain again with me, because that fear is real, it's scary, that pain is deep. I really appreciated it when you spoke about the trauma that lasts a long time. Right, so I was talking about, for the Matts of the world, the trauma of any kind of infidelity, but it's particularly the way that his infidelity went down, right? He thought he was in a loving marriage. He had been with her for something like 10 years. They were high school sweethearts. They were, I think, their first love with each other. And one day she comes home and says, I'm pregnant with someone else's child. So just imagine, it's one thing to find out that your partner, and I'm leaving you for him. It's one thing to find out that your partner has been cheating on you. That can be absolutely traumatic. It's another thing to learn that your partner is pregnant by the other person. It's another thing to learn that they're leaving you. It's just like, and I think he even knew the guy or so. Anyway, so that will do a number on your working model of self and others in a really, destructive way. So I really appreciate it when you spoke about the trauma that lasts a long time. Thank you. It's not talked about enough. It happens to both genders, all genders. I helped my husband heal with these corrective experiences. Right. So just pointing out that for the anonymous deserving listeners, she's saying that she proved that she could be depended on to her husband. She leaned into it and said, you can trust me. I'm not going to cheat on you. You think I'm going to, or you get suspicious or overly hurt about things, but I'm here. You can trust me. I'm going to prove that you can trust other people. And that was a corrective experience for him in that it reworked his working model of self and others, meaning he could trust others and felt like he deserved to have people take care of him. So I helped my husband heal with these corrective experiences that I provided. It never comes up anymore because I provided him with these corrective experiences. So I want everyone to know it absolutely can be fixed. I'm not enjoying the commentary on the internet about Matt and Colleen. So just chiming in here, I think anonymous deserving listeners saying that there's a lot of people kind of with a black and white perspective about Matt and Colleen. And they're saying they don't enjoy that commentary. Listening to you, I feel validated, and it makes me proud that I helped my partner heal. So I wonder if online people are saying, Colleen, leave him. He's an abusive person. Leave him. Now, maybe that's good advice. Hard to know. But there are other options, right? Like what this person's saying. Your videos really help me understand both viewpoints, no matter the situation. In general, it's a skill that I've been working on since discovering your videos, and it's a very helpful life skill. Oh, well, thank you. That makes my day. That's the mission of my life, part of it. Love is Blind, Season 3, number 20. Daniela says, so this is the one where Nancy's mom was interrupting. As a Latina, children, siblings, and parents are so emotionally embedded with each other that if one hurts, we all hurt deeply. I'm not saying this is a good thing within the Latino community, but just saying that it exists. It's hard to separate from your family emotionally because they make you feel guilty. End of comment. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was talking about that, maybe not specifically regarding Latino families, Latinx families, but as a Japanese American, we have a similar tendency. And I think I talked about that, right? Like how we all show up everywhere. It's like there's just really no question. I don't think we would have done what their family did in that situation, but I can relate to that. And yeah, absolutely. In other families, what we might call more waspy families, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, a lot more in general, distance between family members and less reactivity and more like, hey, you're having this situation. I'll leave you alone. I'm over here if you need help, but don't ask me for help because you got to figure stuff out on your own. It's pros and cons obviously to that. So there are different cultural elements here, and I think that that makes sense. On says, it made me feel uneasy when Nancy had to play peacemaker between Bartice and her family when she was the one who got rejected on national TV, at the altar, no less. It seemed to me like it was their collective ego that was bruised, and they didn't prioritize being there for Nancy. They constantly seemed to disregard what Nancy wanted, which was space. Yeah, certainly. Another way of looking at it, and I think I talked about this, was that the family believes that the way you show appreciation is to insert yourself and to maybe not regard their pushback, right? Like in my family, we do this frequently. We literally call it like the Japanese thing that we do where, and I don't know if this is Japanese, because I'm fourth generation, my Japanese people came over 120 years ago. So the culture in Japan was different in the 1800s than it is now. So I don't know, but a lot of Japanese Americans are this. And then you got to delineate between Hawaiian Japanese Americans and West Coast Japanese Americans, very different cultures there. But anyway, West Coast Japanese Americans, it's common, not for all of us, but it's common for us to try to help people and to sacrifice ourselves for others. So, for example, a kind of a silly example that's easy to talk about, but there are many more nuanced examples, but this is the most easiest, is that when you have people that might be struggling financially, not struggling, maybe struggling, but also, like when I was in college, when I was a young person, everyone knew that I didn't have any money, and I couldn't afford really anything, and I couldn't. I remember I would want to have lunch at a fast food restaurant, and I'd be like, I can't afford to go to McDonald's; it's too expensive for me, literally. And so, frequently that was the case from maybe 16 to 28 or something, maybe even beyond that. Anyway, point is that my relatives would know my status and would try to give me money, but it was my job to say, no, I'm okay. And then, no, here you go. No, I'm okay. Even though in my head I'm like, it'd be kind of nice, but no, it's okay. And then I'd get home and I would find money in my coat pocket. And what they would do is, as they're hugging me, they would slip money like a backwards pickpocket into my jacket. I get home and there'd be like a 20 and 100 or something, and I'd be like, oh, that's going to help. And so that kind of thing, right? Of like, no, even though I kind of want it, but no, don't put yourself out. And then other people have to force themselves. That's the way. There's also a whole thing around paying for the bill at a restaurant when there's all of us there. Very, very complicated political process. It's to the point now where when I want to pay, I literally will get to the restaurant first and give the person working my credit card before any of my family show up, and I say, I'll tip big if you refuse anyone else's card in this moment. Because if I don't do that, someone else is going to beat me to it. And sometimes I win and sometimes I lose. Anyway, so in that instance, with Nancy, it's possible that the family was like, well, yeah, you're saying no, but we know that you want our help. So, or it would be counter to the way that we see how we deal with things as a collectivist family for us to just look the other way. We're here for you, Bartise did something to you that was wrong, and as he also did something to us. Now, is that healthy? We'd really have to ask Nancy, like how bad was it? Is this a pattern? Did she basically kind of appreciate it? Did she basically kind of know what the family was up to? Hard to know, because I could see on one hand Nancy saying things like, yeah, I don't know. It was kind of nice to see my family freaking out. It felt like they were in my corner. I kind of wish that they didn't do that much, but, it felt kind of good. On the other hand, you could see Nancy saying, oh, no, my family is constantly invading my space, and it's a thing, and my mom in particular. And, yeah, I know it's a cultural thing, but get out of my hair. Like, we don't know. We'd have to really ask Nancy, so, And I think I was debating that as I was watching and appreciating it, and also anyway. Love is Blind season 3 number 21. Oh no, that's what I was just talking about. Love is Blind season 3 24. This is the aftermath of the wedding of Cole and Zay. Joshua says, I genuinely feel as though Zay was looking for her deep D moment here, whereby Cole in no way equated to the overt hostility and cruelty that Shake did. So just chiming in here, that's interesting. So Deep D had that moment where throughout the season, Shake was putting her down, basically saying that she's not attractive. I'm trying to remember exactly how he said everything. I mean, at the very least, he was saying he's not attracted to her. But by implication, I think Shake was even saying she's attractive, she's really beautiful, but I'm just not attracted to her. But anyway, so after the season, or as the season was playing out, Shake definitely shook out to be the one that everyone hated, and Deep D was the one that everyone loved, right? So perhaps Zay was looking for that moment. But I don't know when they filmed this, because the season 2 of Love is Blind with Deep D, that was just earlier this year, 2022. Whereas the filming of this, of season 3, I think might have been before that. So, but it maybe by Deep D moment, you mean like it's understood on reality TV that some people shake out to be the bad guys and some the good guys. So maybe Zay was looking for that moment. But you're saying that Zay misunderstood the scenario, that the way it would play or the way it was edited or something. You go on to say, Joshua, was Cole immature? Certainly. Did he deserve this treatment? Absolutely not. I can't wait for your reaction to the reunion. My fiance and I actually got into an argument about it. Ha. Yeah, like I said, I've watched it already, and we'll post those soon. I'm also planning, people have been sending me videos of interviews with the cast after the reunion came out. And I don't know if I'm going to do that, but it's on the agenda to look at it. And Joy says, I think Zay's treatment was vindictive to Cole and was lashing out more at her past relationships than at Cole. People praising her behavior is disgusting to me. Yeah, so Zay seemed to be displacing, hard to know, but seems likely, right? And you also say that people praising her behavior, and that is disgusting to you. So people are praising her behavior. Yeah, I mean, often that happens in these kinds of shows, right? People will take a side. Think about the trial between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. When there's a canvas upon which we can project and displace, we're going to do it, particularly when we have a deep need to project and to displace or transfer. And when we do that, we will be biased, right? So I'm guessing there's a lot of people that Cole provided a very easy canvas, and that Zay provided a very easy canvas upon which they could transfer themselves, displace themselves onto Zay and look at Cole as a past relationship or a current relationship, or vice versa, right? I think, and I know that a lot of people have dealt with people like Cole, and I know a lot of people have dealt with people like Zay in their personal lives. So I think that might be why people might look at the situation seemingly non-objectively. But it's hard to know. And I always say this, that who knows, if we were really there, it'd be hard to believe we would be drastically different. For me, that I would be drastically of a different mind if I was there, a fly on the wall, watching their whole relationship play out. But there's a chance that it would be a lot more nuanced, that Cole was, because we did see him say some stuff that was inappropriate and uncalled for. Are you bipolar? And that kind of stuff. It was pointed, aggressive, arrogant, off-putting in a variety of ways, wrong. And it was interesting because I was looking at other commentary around that comment, and most people, if not everyone that I saw making comments, typing or talking, actually thought it was a valid diagnosis of Zay's presentation, because I guess most people don't understand what bipolar is. Yeah. I've already been over all that stuff, and what's the difference if she did have bipolar? It doesn't mean that you just beat someone over the head with it. Anyway. 90 Day Fiance, Angela and Michael 49. Good old S. Melanita says, Angela is my dad in a long blonde wig. It's fascinating and terrifying how similar people can be with such different backgrounds. Yeah, well, I'm sorry you went through that, S. Melanita. Yeah, it's interesting watching Angela, because there are times when I'll think, my God, this is so out of the ordinary. But then I'm like, no, it's actually not. I mean, it certainly isn't super common, but the things she is the things she's doing is it's common enough. And it might seem like, what? She is a alien from outer space. And, it's sad, but her behavior isn't that strange. It's strange to see it on a TV show, because most of the time people hide that behavior, but she doesn't. A deserving listener, Lena from Germany, emailed in, and she says, I watched your episode about Daniel and enmeshment with Tiffany. I just wanted to let you know the way you were so protective over Daniel and the way you were hurting for him so badly allowed me for the first time to cry and sob for myself. I was allowed for the first time to grieve the childhood I lost because of my codependent mother, parentifying me so badly, to the point where she asked me to sleep in her bed when my father moved out when I was 10. I felt all that anger and resentment towards her for a long time, but I never was able to be sad for myself. So I want to thank you for that from the bottom of my heart. Well, deserving listener Lena from Germany, I'm glad that you were able to be sad for yourself. You have a lot to be sad for, a lot to grieve about. The loss of your childhood. You say, I was allowed to grieve the childhood that I lost. And that's a huge part of the healing process for you, Lena, and everyone else out there who's been parentified. It's a big part of my work with parentified individuals is grieving that loss. It's just gone. Now, you can approximate it later in life, right? You can try to go back through being playful, hanging out with kids, creativity, freedom, not being responsible for others. Certainly. And that can be very healing and very justice attaining. But it's different. And you'll never be 10 again. You'll never be able to go back there and be allowed to just be 10. Because as adults, we can't really be 10. We have responsibilities, particularly if we get married, have kids, there's just responsibilities. And so we can never be fully 10 or 5 or whatever. So that those years are just gone. And if you weren't given that opportunity to really be a kid, then, that ship has sailed and the sadness is what you feel. The anger is also there. I'm glad you're able to feel the anger and resentment. You deserve to feel that as well. It depends. It's hard to know exactly what to do about that. Do you get angry at your codependent mother or not? It depends. But you deserve all those feelings, and because the damage that's done through parentification, like we're seeing with Tiffany and Daniel, I don't know if that's what's really happening. It looks like that. There are red flags to that. But the damage is that the child has to put themselves on the back burner, all their feelings, all their dreams, all their needs, all their wants, to pay attention to and take care of and attend to the parents' issues. And when you're older, you still have that tendency to put yourself in the back burner. But when you do that, you have no idea what you need and how you feel. And thus you have no idea how to meet your needs. And you can't even interact with other people in a way that is allowing them to meet your needs because you don't even know what your needs are. So now a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So occasionally you'll just randomly land on something that meets your needs and you'll feel good about it. But then you'll go back to doing random trial and error and not really knowing what your needs are when, because your needs change over time, day to day, hour to hour. So the work is to get in touch with those needs, which is facilitated through getting in touch with your emotions. So when you get in touch with your sadness and your grief and your anger and your resentment, you're getting in touch with your body, your emotions, your needs, and thus you have a more robust neurological connection, and it really is a neurological connection. You're making connections to be more spontaneously aware of your needs, because you really need to be, like for me, I was raised well enough that on average, the bell curve, I'm pretty quick to recognize I don't like something or I don't want something or I do like something or and I'll feel it and I'll react accordingly to meet my needs. I'm also taking into consideration other people's feelings and needs, but I'm a part of the equation, and I'm able to communicate that to my wife or other people around me so that they can meet my needs. If you don't have that ability, then you're frequently upset at other people because they're not meeting your needs, but you don't really know what needs they're not meeting, and you don't have the ability to point them in the right direction in the moment that you need it. So I'm glad that you're able to do that. Of course, therapy is the best way to connect with that, and it provides the most sound guidance and also rapid learning and corrective experiences to help one do that. But I'm glad that you're able to do that. And I'm glad that my video helped you with that. That's a huge deal to me to be able to provide that for, people will say that, they'll be like, oh, I've been watching videos for a long time, but that one, when you went on that rant or whatever, like that one hit me and I just sobbed for a day or something, and we all deserve that. You deserve that. And I have my moments like that as well. And this is a part of my life, right? I mean, this is what I do as a therapist. I'm not always trying to achieve that, moment with every single session that I have with a client, but that is something that happens. That's something I'm, in a sense, moving towards the client's needs and helping them, push aside the barriers thereof. But also with students, I'll be talking to students or even just friends sometimes, and I'll have a reaction the way that I am, and students will have like this, like, whoa. I intellectually always knew this, but I'm really feeling it right now because of the way in which you reacted. Because if I had said in that video with Daniel, he is parentified, and through parentification and enmeshment, that would facilitate some understanding. But to have it impact me, because it did, I couldn't help but to be impacted. It was hard to watch, as y'all know, as I was watching that. I wouldn't say it's the hardest thing I've ever watched, but, in some ways it might be up there because this is a kid. This isn't Angela and Michael. Watching Michael get victimized is tough to watch, but he has power-ish. I don't know. There's just something about a kid that is, especially in a situation like that, he doesn't have another parent, and then you think, like, was that why he was so desperate for a connection with Ronald? That it was another person to help him with his mom in some way, or I don't know. Now, I did point out that Tiffany did show some strengths and seemingly some development and growth since the last time we had checked in with her. She seemed to have some ideas in her mind of just like, I'm not going to bother you with it. I don't want you to worry about that. So that was good. There was a lot of good stuff there. But, we also saw some pretty rough indications, red flags. Anyway, so I couldn't help but to have a reaction. And, we can maybe have that as in terms of the first email, or why would people watch my reaction videos? Maybe, it's another part of that, right? So, yeah. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. And keep commenting, because I like to read it. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.